Hi, everyone. Good evening. For those of us, I think good evening for those of us who are in the Midwest and East Coast, maybe not quite evening yet for some of those on the West Coast, but we are so excited that you are here and we cannot wait for this incredible event. I've been looking forward to it all week. I can't think of any better way to spend my Thursday. And so I hope that you didn't either. And that's why you're here, because this is the best thing that you could possibly be doing. My name is Stephanie, and I am with the Novel Neighbor. We are a bookstore, an independently owned and operated bookstore that can be found in St. Louis, Missouri. Don't worry, if you're not in Missouri, we are happy to ship. So if you're like, I still haven't picked up my copy of Redemptor, which, first of all, what are you doing? But second of all, we are happy to get that to you. We have some amazing signed book plates. We have a limited copy of some limited supply of some extra special things too that we could always include. So we are so excited that you're here. We are maybe even more excited that Chloe and Jordan are here tonight. Again, I just got off from spending a little bit of time with them backstage, and there's already so much positive energy that we just know this conversation is going to be incredible. Our layout for the night will be Chloe and Jordan in conversation with each other for just a little bit, and then we will take question and answer. We'll do a Q&A with the audience. So if there's something that comes up during this that you really wish we could ask of Jordan and of Chloe, please put it in the comments. We would love to ask that. We love getting questions during this, and I know Jordan and Chloe will be so excited to answer them. Our first author this evening, as I said, is Chloe Gong. She is the New York Times bestselling author of These Violent Delights and its sequel, Our Violent Ends, which is coming very soon. She is a recent graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, where she double majored in English and International Relations. Born in Shanghai and raised in Auckland, New Zealand, Chloe is now located in New York, pretending to be a real adult. Chloe has been known to mysteriously appear if you chant Romeo and Juliet is one of Shakespeare's best plays and doesn't deserve its slander in pop culture into a mere 3 times. She is joining us tonight in conversation with the incredible Jordan Ifueko, author of Raybearer and Redemptor. We are so excited about these books. Jordan is the New York Times bestselling author, as I said, of the Raybearer series. She is a Nebula Award, Ignitea Award, Audio Award, and Hugo Lodestar finalist. And she's been featured in People magazine, NPR's Best Books, NPR Pop Culture Happy Hour, and ALA Top 10. She writes about magic Black girls who aren't magic all the time because, honestly, they deserve a vacation. Ifueko lives in Los Angeles with her husband, David, and their 3-legged Trustafarian dog, Reginald Overkama. So without any further ado, please welcome Jordan and Chloe.
Hi! I am so excited to be here. Oh my God, I'm literally like I'm that meme. You know the meme of the kid who had too much sugar?
Oh my gosh, thank you for being here.
Of course,
I'm sure
for having me.
I'm going to tone down my own fangirling here so we can actually have a conversation. I'm glad to be here with you.
It's not just us screaming at each other for 20 minutes until the bookstore has to come back and be like, honestly, that it would be an entertaining event. But how is release week going? How is everything?
You know, it's been really great. It's funny how much of a shift it will be when, if ever, I have a mostly in-person release week, because, you know, none of us expected to be in a pandemic for 2 years, let alone last year with my debut, your debut. I think it was your debut, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also
exactly, being like all these virtual tours. And honestly, like, even though last year I was disappointed, I was like, oh, I really wanted to like go to bookstores and stuff like that. And this year I at least got to go to a bookstore that was really great, Once Upon a Time Books. It's like, this is kind of nice. Just these virtual events where it's just like, oh, I don't have to like rush to, you know, a train station or anything. I can just like mosey on over to my reading room and talk to super cool famous authors. So it's been wonderful. Is the short answer to your question.
Yeah. Once the real world, you know, starts coming back, it'll feel like we're debuting again. Because now we're getting like the accessible, like we can reach people across the world debut experience and sequel to debut experience. And then, you know, when the world opens again, it'll be like, oh my God, signing a real book in front of a person.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. I know that you're going to ask most of the questions, but I have a question for you since you were also a debut last year. have you yet had the experience of being in a room with strangers who are discussing what happens in your book? Because that didn't happen to me until like maybe a few months ago, like almost a whole year after, because like we were all vaccinated and Delta wasn't a thing yet. So I actually got to go to like a small party with people I didn't know there. And some of them had read Raybearer. And when they found out I was the author, they started talking about what happens in this story. And it was that moment, not like a year of like a promotion and release and bestselling, like all that was great. But it was that moment when I realized that my book was published, like just a few months ago. Like these are people I've never met talking about a world that was in my head for 12 years. Like, have you had that experience yet?
I haven't had it in person yet, but it's, I think that's why it feels so surreal to me still, because I've seen it online. Like people will tag me, it'll just be a huge thread of just someone reading it. I'll be like, wow, but I haven't experienced it like in person yet, mostly because I haven't gone outside a lot yet. But I'm looking forward to just overhearing in a bookstore and be like, oh, you should pick up that book. Like I hear the author's like so great, you know. But as we get back to the conversation to celebrate the amazing, this way, I'm always not used to Crowdcast being flipped. The amazing Redemptor. To get started, I would love, and all your readers would love to hear your little elevator pitch or like what Redemptor is about.
Yes. So, real quick, for those of you who have not read Raybearer, Raybearer is the story of a magically hewn Pangea megacontinent ruled by an emperor who's rumored to be divine, because for every person he anoints to his council with which he rules this empire, he becomes immune to one kind of death. The catch being that anyone on his council can still kill him. So to ensure their loyalty and that we don't have any assassination attempts, children are generally chosen for this council when people are generally chosen for this council when they're children, and they grow up with the emperor and become so divinely bonded and mentally dependent that like they grow ill if they spend any time apart. And the protagonist is this young woman who is chosen to be part of the council and be a plant to murder the emperor when he grows up, or at least when she's anointed. And Redemptor is the conclusion of that young woman's story. And it's so hard to describe without any spoilers, but there is court intrigue and trying to woo different monarchs of culturally distinct realms. There's balls, there's assassination attempts under the moonlight, there's fairies the size of volcanoes, there's a trip to the Underworld, where like deaths have physical manifestations in the forms of beasts, lots of stuff. And if Raybearer is the story of like choosing your name and acknowledging that you can be a chosen one and have a purpose, Redemptor is about what happens when you find out you don't necessarily have all the skills needed to achieve your purpose. And even once you have had your eyes open to the way the world works and systematic injustice, and you have the passion to change it, those that you love and those that you grew up around may not have made that journey with you. And so you have to balance being with a community who loves you and nourishes you with your newfound calling to make the world a better place. So that was my attempt at summarizing two full-length novels.
That was a great summary. And it's hard to summarize like masterpieces. Like really, everyone, you should just pick it up and read it. Like that was already so good, but like nothing will compare to actually like just sinking into the pages. I'm pretty sure I read both of these. I keep pointing the wrong side. I'm pretty sure I read both of these
I'm gonna do that multiple times.
Like around one sitting. Like it's just so. I'll calm myself down before I just like go on like my 5-star rave in person. But like, it's so good. It's so good. Okay,
thank you. That means so much to me coming from you. Just like, oh my gosh. I know that you have many, many, many beautiful phrases throughout these Violent Delights, but one of the ones that sticks in my head, and it's just a small one, is like from the first couple pages when you describe the moon as like round and plump, just like hanging alone in the sky, and I'm just like, the moon is plump. Like I've never thought of that. Nice. Like it's just plump. You have such visceral descriptions. I love it. Yeah.
Two questions. Like you said before, Raybearer has been living in your head for 12 years, right? And then you had to write the sequel, and you probably had to write a lot of the sequel during a pandemic. So how was your experience getting this magnificent like follow-up of a book? Like how did it happen?
It was very, very difficult. Partially because I'd never written a book within a year before, and partially because so many things happened at the time. You know, I was struggling with some pretty bad depression and anxiety, undiagnosed focus disorder, and on top of all that, there was the, state-sanctioned violence against the riots for brutality, and the pandemic, and the pub date of Raybearer getting moved, and me feeling like I have to panic to promote my book, because even with the full support of my publisher, this was a situation none of us had been in before. So all of the traditional ways of promoting a book, it was just like, I guess most of those don't apply anymore. Is this going to flop? It's my first book. I worked so hard on it. I was so excited, So luckily it didn't flop. Writing Redemptor was very, very hard, but it's still something that I'm extremely proud of, just because what it ended up being, it couldn't have ended up the way it was if I hadn't had that circumstance. Like, Redemptor was originally supposed to be more of like a sprawling adventure romp throughout all of these different realms of Aritsar, but because of the situations in which I was writing it, it ended up being this like much grimmer, introspective, magical novel in which mental illness and isolation and dealing with communities and your sense of purpose takes physical shape in these like monsters and elements, and it's which I feel is a more unique story than the one that I had outlined. Although adventure romps are also fun, but it's an experience that I kind of hope to never have to be in again, of writing a book in a year with all of that other stuff going on. I do think I could write a book in a year now instead of 12, which is great. But it was unlike anything I've ever done.
Well, can I just say, I think the ending was like, it blew me away. It was like, the whole book was so much darker than the first one. Like, I'm not going to spoil it, obviously. All of you read it for yourself. But the ending it pulled everything together so well. And especially like the themes that just were coming through. I was like, oh, that was such a good final decision. I just I read it like the entire time. I was like, oh my God, Galaxy Brain.
Thank you so much.
This whole like 20 minutes that I have the stage with you is just going to be me like abandoning that. But my next point of gushing, your world building, as you were saying, it's a like Pangea, kind of land. World building was so good, and I was just obsessed with the like nuance that first Raybearer and then Redemptor had with like imperialism and like empire building, and just I've always thought that fantasies don't grapple enough with like their empire tropes, and they just go right into it. So I was like, oh my God, like this fixes every problem I've ever had with fantasies that don't grapple with that. So looping around to that is just basically ask you about your world building and how you came to like form this Pangea world and like inspirations and all of that, because excellent.
Oh, thank you so much. One of the wonderful things about writing Raybearer over so many years, I started it when I was 13, is that it grew up with me. So the same epiphanies that Tarisai makes about the setting and the empire, and even questioning the idea of empire and questioning the very idea of a rightful ruler of an empire. Is that even a thing that can really exist? Like, those were things that I was finding out as I grew up. I think without meaning to, a lot of fantasy, a lot of sweeping adventure follows a Western European imperialist structure with a lot of assumptions, without even meaning to. Like, one example that I use a lot, the Narnia books have problems, but like, this is one that I don't hear talked about a lot. And then, I'm very fond of them. I grew up with them. There are a lot of things they do beautifully. But when you really think about it, the Chronicles of Narnia are the stories of 4 blonde children who come to a land they've never been to before, with inhabitants that are perfectly are sentient, intelligent beings with their own structures and customs. But these 4 people are the ones who are meant to rule it, these people from the outside. And nothing is right until these 4 people rule this world that they've never even been in before. And, it's extremely imperialistic, right? Like it's as beautiful as the story is, it still echoes all of these inherent assumptions you might make. And of course, that was at one of the heights of British imperialism, like the 40s and 50s when it was written. So with Raybearer, you see Tarisai accepting this structure of, there's an emperor, and, we're so progressive because every single realm gets representation and ruling on this anointed council. And there's that little thing about how women can't be Raybearers, but, we still get to be here, and, it's so great, and we're so revered. And she accepts this narrative in the first book. And in the first book, the realization she has is okay, maybe the whole, I should smother my own leadership instincts and just serve the one male Raybearer isn't great. But I had to go farther than that. In the second book, we see her, because that is a really good realization to make, right? For women to realize, hey, we can be leaders too. But unless you go further than that, you kind of get into the girl boss trap where it's just oh, women can also exploit people who are lower than them.
Women can also be men.
Exactly. Women can also, rule over empires and reinforce class structure. Yay! And so for Tarisai to, even after she has embraced this, beautiful elevated role of royalty, for her to then grapple with the very fabric of the system and the legacy she's inherited was very important to me. And so that happens in Redemptor.
Kind of going off of that, when you talk about, what you kind of Tarisai's journey, from the events of Raybearer into the events of Redemptor, for the fans of Raybearer who are now excitedly running to the store to get Redemptor, what can they kind of look forward to? What do you think are the similarities between the books? What do you think of kind of you sort of took it to 100,
Well, I think one similarity is some deepened relationships, mostly between Tarisai and Dio. I think the books have a difficult it's a difficult thing to accomplish in 2 books, even 3 or 4, because the premise is that she has this wonderful, deep, mental connection with 11 other people. And so, in my original drafts, I have the lore of every single person on the council and Tarisai's personal connection and friendship with them. And there isn't room for that on the page. And so I had to select a few just to deepen and so you can get to know them. And so one familiar one is with Dio. You get to see how they support each other in a really platonic way too, which is something that I don't feel gets enough representation on a page. Is just even when you have people who, or at least one person who could be sexually attracted to the other. Dio is asexual, although he's still romantic, so he could still have that attachment to Tarisai, right? And they don't. They love each other to death. They would die for each other, but it's a kind of love that I don't know. It's just so special to me because I rarely see it represented. Where it's just you are my other half, and I could not do without you. And we can love each other like that without necessarily wanting to be a romantic couple, and that's true. It happens. And there is romance still, which is still fun. I love romance. But
excellent, the platonic soulmates of it all.
Yeah. And, and female friendships are also really important to me. In the first book, that was mostly between Tarisai and Kira. I get to deepen her friendship with another one of her female council members in this book. Her name is Ailing. She comes from the province of Moriao, which is loosely based on certain provinces of, the Han Chinese. But there's so many more. She has such a deep friendship with all of these people that I didn't get to put on the page. But within Redemptor, you can expect like learning a little bit more about some of the other council members, a lot more about a bunch of new council members, like the monarch she has to befriend, a handsome stranger with some secrets. You get to see lots of new settings within Aritsar that you didn't get to see before.
Amazing. Tangentially, how long was your like initial first draft of Raybearer? Since you were saying like you had all the lore fleshed out, like because I know when I was 13, my first manuscript was like 200,000 words long. So was that also something that you went through?
Well, the funny thing is, over 12 years, I never finished Raybearer. I just either kept adding and adding or rewriting and rewriting. So I'd have, every time I came up with a new ending in my mind, I'd basically start again. And every time I'd be like, no, this is what the book should be about, I'd start again. As a very dramatic artiste.
Wow.
So cumulatively, over 12 years, it's probably easily like 400,000 words. Like it's a lot of words. But I should really look into the oldest archive and see the early versions of some of these characters, because I don't know, that could be fun.
I love like looking back at like previous versions of characters that you're so familiar with, like especially with like former projects. It's like you go look at how they used to be and it's like, wow, it's like two completely different characters, but you can feel like the heart of it. You can see like it's like a Pokemon evolution.
Yeah, and I don't know, I really love getting the opportunity to see characters just kind of hang out. Like I had to cut out a bunch, but it would be my dream just to be able to write tens of thousands of words of these characters, just like having lunch and playing pranks on each other and like cuddling at night, 5 of 5, like just
you would not complain if you're
just
publishing
no plot, barely any conflicts.
If you're publishing books to give us novellas who are doing that, we wouldn't complain. We would simply put the cards out.
I've talked about writing like a holiday special, like novella version of this, where it's basically just like, okay, the plot is how is Tarisai going to find like a present for Sanjeet for this festival, and it's just like that's like the whole conflict.
You should, absolutely should.
That would be fun.
All of us in the comments are like, I mean, I can't. Everyone in the comments, give us a question if you want this, if you want to see this holiday special. Just be like, holiday special.
I think that'd be fun.
Really would be. Okay, I don't want to like. I would take up so much of our time if I asked all the questions that I have prepared, but I want to leave time for the audience Q&A. So I'll go through. I guess I'll go through like two more questions, and then we'll switch to what everyone else wants to ask. I'm sure a lot of people will want to ask many things, but. So I would love to know, when you set out to write these books, who did you write these books for, and like who do you hope will find these stories and just really?
I mean, again, because at least with Raybearer, because it grew up with me, it was a different audience every time. Like when I was 13, my main objective was to immortalize my own experience of intense friendship. Like, I'm not sure I even thought about audiences that much, even though, I had these big grand ambitions to become a writer. But basically, I was homeschooled until I was 13. And then I was placed into a tiny private high school where my graduating class was 17 people. And it was the first time in my life where I got to be with people my own age, although, they were older than me. I tested into high school, but where I got to be with other teenagers for 6 hours a day, and we did everything together because we were such a small class. Like we just moved around to our classes together. And it was a very special time for me. It was a time of intense anxiety. I second guessed myself all the time because I was like, these kids know all this stuff and I've been so sheltered. And a time of intense love and friendship. And so, my best future that my little lonely 13-year-old self could think was like, what if there was a situation where all of us had to be together forever and we were like mentally bonded? And it was also like a very like, it was a very kind of like snooty prep school. And so, you know, the idea of these kids being like groomed to rule an empire was something that wasn't very hard for me to imagine, because, you know, we were doing like debates and rhetoric and the like. And so when I first wrote it, I don't know that it was for anyone. I think I just, you know, when you're a kid, you don't have a lot of agency, and the things that are precious to you can feel very fragile. Like, I just thought like, oh, this could be torn away from me at any moment. And so and it almost was, because my dad's job changed, which is the reason we moved up there in the first place, to Oregon. And so I almost lost all of them, my best friends. And so I was just devastated and started writing even more furiously. Like, a lot of this original story is out of that love and loneliness and a desire for connection and wanting it to be permanent somewhere. And then as I grew older and got, you know, just more keenly felt how little representation I'd had in fantasy, a genre that many Black and brown girls love, but doesn't really love us back. You know, it became more of a shout, like, we can have these stories. We can exist in a place where we are the feted ones, we are the celebrated ones, where we can go on these grand, beautiful adventures and not just be the best friend or absent, or, you know, like the slave that gets that their story and their coming of age is from like being sexually abused or physically abused, and all these things that, you know, are pretty relegated to, especially to dark-skinned Black girls. So yeah, it was for different people at different stages. Redemptor, because I wrote that all in a year, I would say it's for anyone who has felt lonely after waking up to systems in the world. You know, like just feeling like, feeling gratitude that you weren't ignorant like you were before, but very rapidly feeling isolated and lonely because so many other people are kind of just fine with the world the way it is. They don't feel any impetus to change. They don't feel any frustration. They feel apathy. Some are even like retroactive and think like, you know, all this wokeness is too much. And, you know, I think a lot of us are in that position, especially a lot of young people. And so the dedication for Redemptor is for revolutionaries, for young revolutionaries who have chosen the loneliest job in the world. So that's primarily who Redemptor is for.
Oh my God. Just you reading that dedication out loud almost made me start crying. I think it's done so well, because you also just tackle that nuance, like with all of that. And yet it's also these people that she loves too. Like, it's not just her realizing that, oh, these people who aren't growing with me are bad people. She's at the same time being like, I'm growing. And also these people who aren't necessarily growing alongside with me, like, she still loves them so much. And it's, you know, it's all hand in hand. It's just, so good.
I feel like that's the way it usually is. I mean, some things are cut and dry. Like, you might learn that a relative who you've never liked is also racist and abusive or sexist. And so you're just like, yeah, I don't want to hang out with them. But I think more often what happens is the same people who nurtured us and loved us and told us bed stories at night and all these things, you grow up and learn how willingly they play into these systems that harm thousands of millions of people. And you can't and shouldn't erase the reality of their love for you and your love for them, but you do have to balance that. You have to hold that in the tension all the time with what you know to be true and the world you need to push forward, you know, and that's difficult. So, yeah.
Yeah. In writing Raybearer, like when you were younger to moving to, you know, Redemptor just this previous year, have you found like changes in your writing process? Because also as someone who started writing at 13, I find it fascinating to look back at like how I used to do it, like just in the notes app, like of my iPad. And now I'm like, I can't write unless it's quiet, unless my AC is on, unless everything is perfect. Have you found like changes in just like your process and the way you go about it?
I've been trying to be able to be the writer that can write in a storm. Like that's the advice I got through all college, like studying writing and literature, is like, you should be able to write in any circumstance because the world is always going to go and you should always like try and produce stories. I haven't succeeded. I do much better when I don't have distractions. There was a period writing Redemptor where I could only let myself have internet for 4 days a week. I'd have to be completely cut off. Like I'm sure if my editor or agent is watching, they'll notice like all the barrage of annoying like emails they'd get like Tuesday through Thursday, like Jordan does not have internet access right now, unless it's an emergency, like you have your cell phone number. But yeah, that was the only way I could get anything done, was not only quiet, but just like no opportunity even for distraction. Like I couldn't have it. I didn't have the internet, you know? And so, yeah, was the question, how is my writing process different? Sorry.
Yeah. How's it changed, like, since you first started to now, especially as like a professional, like, you know, author doing a sequel and, you know, all of that. Yeah.
I mean, one thing that I've said in all of my panels recently is that once you become a professional writer, once you start writing professionally, I don't think it's actually that helpful for you to attach your identity to being a writer. You can love writing, you can, you know, find so much fulfillment in it, but the moment you make it your identity, like writing is what makes me me, then when you can't write, it's more than you not being able to write. It's now you're not being you. Now you're a fraud. Now you're not really who you say you are. And that's so stifling. And I have gotten into that loop so many times. So with Redemptor and just me at some point being like, I just have to get the story out. I have to. I'm contracted. I'm nervous. I feel like a fraud. Even though Raybearer made it to the bestseller list, that just made me more anxious because I'm like, everyone's expecting goodness and I'm not really good. I somehow tricked everybody with my first book into thinking I could write. You know how like mean your brain can be to you. And so basically one way I had to mature is to think like, if I never wrote another word again, I would still be a valuable human being. I could still live a full life with people I love and people who love me. I could still enjoy beauty. I could still create beauty in some way. And yet I'm going to write this book. And that was the kind of mindset I needed to just even begin to write and to de-stress that anxiety and that sense of my identity is on the line here. And so, yeah, I would say that's one way I've changed, is to treat writing like not like something that I have to do to be me, even though it still plays a very big part in my life and I love it. It's just, that's the way I have to think about it in order to not just get paralysis.
That's such good advice. Like, even for people who are just starting out in writing too, like if people watching this are starting this now, like especially in the internet age, so you can watch people tweet about, you know, I wrote 5,000 words today, or like people every few months finishing a new manuscript. It can be so easy to get into the rut of, oh, I'm not a real writer because blah, blah, blah did this, blah, blah, blah did that. And it's like, being a writer, like you'll divorce, like, you know, your products and you as a person. Just writing can be in any which format. So that was
it's brutal. Yeah. Twitter can be a really great tool when you're starting out. Like that's where I found my writing community. And got to connect with these wonderful people, Nomina Forna, Danielle Clayton, Angie Thomas, you know. But I think at a certain point, like, I don't know, I'm never going to commit to this, but like, I sometimes wonder if just not being on Twitter and seeing those constant updates would be the best thing for my career. You'd lose that like promotion power that you really need at the beginning. So I wouldn't recommend being off the grid when you're trying to start out. But afterwards, like, I was just like, this isn't helping me get stuff done. This is just making me feel like a failure and get stressed out and then like avoid writing because I already feel like I'm so behind. So
there's just so much noise online, and it's like they're the both good and the bad, because you can make all your friends out of just having everyone there constantly talking, right? You can find your group. Like all the friends are like amazing. Like it's, you need them to like survive in the industry. But then there's also
last year.
especially now that we're all online.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day. Hello.
Hi, I'm back. This has been such an incredible conversation so far. We have so many questions coming through, so we'll try our best to get to all of them, everyone. And please keep them coming if things have given you new ideas of questions to ask. Sometimes I wish that in this format, you still miss seeing people's faces because I wish you could see how funny both of you are. I'm sure you know that. I hope you know how funny you are. But there's also a lot of comments. Just a couple to highlight. People are really loving the realization of what Chronicles of Narnia is. So Jordan, you've started a whole entire conversation happening. I think like a couple of us are gonna be like, whoa, I haven't thought about that series in a minute. Also, Chloe, I just can't get over your Pokemon evolution comment. I love that so much. I was like, oh, that's so classic. Also because, we recently started buying Pokemon cards again. I don't know. It's fine. Our household is going through that phase of the pandemic. Like, it's great. And so it's very prominent in our minds. And then, like, I think, Chloe, you met the goal of there's a big call for a holiday special, Jordan. So just
give it to the people.
The people want it, Jordan. The people want it. We need it.
So fun.
Well,
there's no Christmas in Oluwan, but there are a lot of festivals, and yet like because I was raised in a Western setting, there's still a big part of me that just like wants like fan art of like the whole council in Santa hats, like.
Oh my gosh! I can't believe that you just said that because we literally let me go find it.
Honest. In the audience right now, you guys know what to draw right now.
This is a legitimate question that came up.
Yeah, like honestly, it's super ambitious, and so I'm not pressuring any artist to do that. Like any portraits of just like a lot of the council siblings just fooling around together, like even just like with their arms around each other. There's one piece of fan art that isn't all of them. It's on my Instagram where it's just Dio, Mira, and Tarisai in kind of like sort of a modernish version of their uniforms in the children's palace, like the black tunic, but they're like in sneakers, and they're just like leaning against each other, and they all have like expressions that are like super consistent with their character. Like Sinji's kind of serious, and Tarisai's, kind of like awestruck, and Kira looks, I don't know, just studious or whatever, and Dio's just like it's just so cute. Anything that emphasizes relationships between any of them is always my favorite.
I am so glad that got brought up. So thank you to viewers watching. And now you have your mission. Should anyone feel inspired? And really quickly, in case people didn't know, because I missed this until like earlier this year, like Chloe, you also wrote us a Christmas special, right? Like that's still available on your website, just in case people missed the memo.
It's not official. I wrote it and I literally emailed my editor like, hey, I wrote a Christmas special. I'm putting it on my website. Is that okay? And she was like, oh, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, like.
I just did it.
No, I mean, obviously that's like the next thing I'm going to read the moment I exit the channel, but like, I'm real quick, like there have been so many wonderful like Audible exclusive specials where they'll basically right now they're basically looking for like things like that where they hire a full cast to read out these short special stories that are through the world of bigger series. So if you could give us a teleplay of that story, all I'm saying is get your agent on that because I want it. So thousands of other people.
I'm just the type to write like fanfic of my own stories all the time. People might know that I literally also wrote a random fanfiction. Like I tweeted, I was like, oh, this headcanon is really cool. And then 2 hours later, I just dropped a Google like Docs link on my feed. And I was like, here you go, it's a fanfic. And everyone was like, this can't be real. This absolutely can't be real. And they clicked in and it was real. I wrote you guys a fic. Like,
like, all I'm saying is get your paper because you can sell this on Audible. And all of us would buy it, and it would be really, really fun.
And that is how authors support other authors. That's what I love to see. That's what we're here for. Okay, Emily has an amazing question here. I want to make sure we get to Emily's question because both of your works have female protagonists, and Emily was getting to the point of like, it's kind of hard. There's a lot of stereotypical like strong women or like the girl who questions herself. And so how do you find balance with creating your like female protagonists?
I'd love to hear from Chloe because I feel like she has a lot of three-dimensional protagonists in my life.
I guess I feel like because I grew up reading so much YA, I was always like, I loved the like girl with a sword trope, like because so much traditional media outside of YA will just have the female character be like, oh, it's not really her story. Let's just focus more on the other characters. So I grew up with like the Throne of Glass, Selenas, and like the Divergent Trisses. And when I set out to write like, Juliet, I was like, well, I want the girl with the soul trope, but I just want her East Asian as well, because we never get to see that. Like the East Asian characters are always quiet, submissive, like they either that or they're just like the dragon lady. And it's like,
or they're not there.
Or not there.
There's no in between where they got to be, people and got to be people that were admired and cool in the same way that, the white YA heroines of the 2010s were, right? So when I set out to write it, I was like, well, I'm going to do this archetype. And then because I'm inherently giving her like a cultural identity that hasn't been seen before, I was like, well, now that also just changes the archetype how we've seen it before. And so, I set out just to write girl with knife, and she's cool. For some people, I'm sure she's like dislikable because she's kind of brash, she's kind of violent, she's kind of like she's pretty full of herself, and rightfully so. And I was like, I wanted to give her all of these attributes because we have seen other protagonists get this, and I was like, it's time for Juliet to shine. And I went in like that. That's my female character creating process. I'm like, it's a little nice, a little violence, and let's go.
I love that Juliet is basically summed up in that vine that's like 4 seconds long. It's like, let me see what you have. A knife! No! Like, yes. That's Juliet.
Exactly her. Yes.
Yeah, so my process writing female protagonists, it's funny. I grew up both in a really fundamentalist religious environment with a lot of like benevolent patriarchy gender roles. Mm-hmm. Like, I grew up right at the time where it was no longer acceptable to say that, like men were better than women, but you also had to make sure that women stayed within these prescribed roles. And so you really tried to glamorize like, oh yes, it's true that men get to have any career they want and women are really supposed to stay home and be homemakers, but it's so important. And so really you guys are equal, even though you only get to do one thing and they get to do all of these things, And so there was that extreme, but then there was also the rise of girl power feminism in like the early 2000s that was trying to be helpful, but really amounted to a new kind of misogyny where anything traditionally feminine was lesser. So this is when you get the lots of like, if there's a heroine and she's strong, it means that she had to have grown up with all brothers and that's why she's awesome. And she has to hate dresses, she has to hate pretty things, she has to think girly girls are stupid and all of that. And, these two tensions were always there. I was always pretty skeptical of the sexist things, although I tried really hard to put myself in that box. I tried to be a very good evangelical teen. And I knew that I also didn't fit in this box because even though I knew women were amazing leaders and had all these qualities, I loved feminine things. I love dresses. I'm literally in a room, like here's my books, and on the other side is all of the fabrics from the patterns of dresses I'm trying to sew. And so there were some crucial books that I felt were really empowering in that they showed different kinds of girlhood and portrayed them all as valid. One of my favorite books of all time to this day is by Gail Carson Levine, who's really famous for Ella Enchanted, but my favorite book of hers is called Two Princesses of Bamar. And they are two sisters. One is the more stereotypical sword girl, and she's awesome, and she's bad at like traditionally feminine things. And her sister Addie is like quiet and gentle, and the thing she's best at is embroidery. And the book sets it up so you expect this brave, boyish sister Meryl to go on the adventure, and then she gets sick. She gets a disease that there isn't a cure to. And so the story ends up being about the timid, gentle sister having to go on this sweeping quest to find a cure for her sister, who she loves very much. And she encounters things like monsters and dragons, and she has to solve them in her way. Like, she outsmarts a dragon with embroidery. Like, and both girls are shown as awesome and wonderful and completely valid things to go after. And I didn't realize until I was older how formative that was for me. Like, you don't have to choose. The whole point of female empowerment should be you can be you, and you have the right to be you without being, you know, like, yeah, without having to fit yourself into boxes, right? And so that is one thing I really love about Raybearer. I do feel we get, I wish we had more time to go into Tarisai's council sisters, because they're all so different and they're all so special to me. But yeah, you see people with a lot of physical talent, like you have like warriors and generals and Captain Boomy, and she's a woman and all this stuff, and people who are physically talented. You see people who have, you might say, I guess, more nurturing strengths, like Kira is a healer, and, you know, she's kind of like the mom friend. She is based on my real life best friend, Tara, who is wonderful. And then Ailing, who is, I love her so much, because for those of you who haven't read Redemptor yet, Ailing's hollow is basically persuasion. Like, she's able to see things in people and use them to persuade them to do things, but she actually doesn't use her hollow very often because she's just good at her job. She's actually kind of just naturally good at people. And so you just have this young woman whose threat is her ability to persuade people to do things. You know, it's I don't know, it's like a charisma that I rarely see portrayed without an element of sexuality, if that makes sense. Like, usually it's like, oh, if you're a persuasive girl, it's because, you know, you're convincing people to have sex with you. Whereas Ailing is just like, you don't want to do that. I think you don't want to do that, actually. And you just kind of start listening to her, like, maybe I don't want to do that. Like, just, you know, like, I've met so many different kinds of women and girls with all of these different strengths. And I don't know. I will never get tired of writing them and their friendships with each other, because that's been my experience of just like, obviously there's the odd like catty girl, and, you know, there are cliques and stuff, but overwhelmingly my experience with friendship with other women and girls has just been wonderful and supportive and really diverse in how that feels. So I love writing those.
You said, oh, sorry, I'm making feedback. I'll move a little bit away. You just totally took me back to a place that I like. You just unlocked a huge memory for me in talking about the two sisters. I remember that, and I like totally, oh my gosh, I hope it brought back memories for somebody, or encouraged somebody to go read that book. It's such a classic. I like forgot the key role that played in my life. And Chloe, Juliet is just, again, back to how incredible of a character is. She truly is amazing. I was like very grateful because my interpretation of Juliet had not been that moving forward, and you like helped reshape Romeo and Juliet for me in a better way, and I'm a big fan of that.
I'm so glad. Yeah, because like the play Juliet, I always think there's this moment in the play where Juliet is about to kill herself, like just to convince someone to do something. I was like, that is hardcore. Why does like character get written off as like soft and like, you know, just useless if she was literally like about to, you know, knife herself to get people to listen to her? So I was like, you know, she had a steel core that I really wanted to bring out in a different interpretation.
That is an excellent point. I feel like Juliet has like the steel core chaotic energy of a lot of 13-year-old girls. Obviously yours isn't 13, but in the play, like, like, thank you for acknowledging like the lengths that teen girls were willing to go through to have agency.
Those are amazing. Like, just among my readers, there have been readers who have threatened to rip out their own mother's guts, to rip off their own siblings' limbs, to, I think someone wanted to put a knife through someone's foot, and they were like, I'll do all this if you give me an arc of our violent ends. I'm like, I'm gonna get sued. Don't commit bodily harm for an arc.
I know that people try and protect children from like gore and stuff, which is valid. Like, hey, there are ways that we glorify violence in our culture that are unhealthy. But the people who think that they'll be like exposing children to like things more morbid than their imagination, I think are a little bit misinformed. I'm just like, have you ever read a story by a 9-year-old? It's like, and then she died in a pool of blood, and blood was coming out of her mouth and out of her side, like just it's so dramatic.
Absolutely. Most teens have been perfectly fine with the amount of violence in my book. Anytime I get tagged by someone who thought it was too gory, an adult.
Doesn't shock me at all. That is so not shocking. Wow. But yeah, thanks again to Emily for that incredible question. That was such a great conversation about women and representation in books, and especially about teenagers and all about that, because I feel like we're in good company here of like, I don't know, this is such a random comment, but like book talk and teenagers on book talk, great recommendations, wild things happening. It's all great. And both your books are huge TikTok books, book talk books. So obviously they have great taste. There is a question I wanted to make sure we got to, because I thought it was so great, of like, how do you create unique words? Words that are like, how do we word?
Every day before I start working, how do I make words? Like, is this something I can Google? Why do I think I can create words? I know I wrote 2 novels, but that's still a bold assumption. Yes. Is the question like, what is our writing process? Or...
Oh, sorry. I didn't enunciate unique words, that like you have unique, like made up words. Oh, but I like that you said. I like that. I love just asking.
Like, how do you put words down? Like, how do you get one word after the other to ultimately make a novel?
I am so sorry. Yes, I'm not leaving you stranded on that island. Yes, unique made up words.
Well, all of the cultures in the Raybearer universe are directly coded to real world cultures, which is something that was really cool to do. But I think next time I'll definitely take more liberties in making up like unique cultures, just because it is a lot of pressure to represent cultures respectfully when you very obviously base them on real world cultures. But all that to say, I didn't have to make up a lot of words. What I'd use, well, I did, but I'd take real world words from like Yoruba, and then sometimes blend them with another Yoruba word to mean something. Like Ileoba is the district, like the royal district, and that just means like house of the Oba, like house of the emperor, house of the king. And so that's just the royal district in which nobles live, you know. So I didn't have to make stuff up very often. I'm doing more of that actually with the contemporary middle grade fantasy that I'm working on right now. It's a near future story where, you know, like basically the United States has been taken over by these big corporations. And so it's been really fun to like put together kind of quirky names. Like even cities have been rebranded after these corporations. So it's just like, you know, like this city that used to be called this is now called this quirky name that kind of mixes the old city name with the brand name, you know. I don't know. It's something that's really fun to play with, just saying things out loud and hearing like, what would you actually like to say? You know, like what sounds do you want to make that make you happy or make you sad or make you kind of creeped out? That can be really fun.
I'm probably not as helpful for this question because since I write historical, all of the words that are in mine are just real words. But for adult fantasy that I wrote, that it's like, you know, all of that publishing secret stuff right now. I won't go into detail, but I actually, so in writing fantasy, I was like, oh, let me just put in some placeholder words. So I actually named a city. I just named it 2-3 in Chinese. Like I just put the like syllables down and I was like, okay, it's a placeholder. And then I finished the novel and I was like, actually, I'm kind of attached to this now. So now the name is quite literally 2-3 in Chinese. Because I was like, actually, in retrospect, this cold clinical name kind of represents, you know, just naming a city after a number. It works out, like, if you think about it thematically. And, like, you know, if you don't speak Chinese, you're not going to realize what it says. It's just, like, a made-up word. So I'm like, oh, okay, there we go, a fantasy name. I've done it.
I'm curious, have you ever named characters, like, not necessarily after people you know, but with the same name as people you know, just because you're like kind of like lazy and think like, okay, this works. Because like writing a story with Yoruba characters, I did that all the time. I'd just be like, I don't want to look up a Yoruba name and like match the meaning to this person. They're pretty minor characters. So I'm just going to name them after some of my distant cousins.
I've done that too. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
These names, like, I really have to think about it, and then I have to ask my mom about the meanings. So sometimes if it's a minor character, I'm like, I'm just going to take my cousin's name and drop it in.
Yeah.
You have to tell them to not take anything personally.
Maybe they'll never find out. They can.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I love that you both do that.
Oh, real quick fun fact. My maiden name is Enobahai, which is a Edo surname. And, you know, so like basically every one of my family members on that side just kind of lose it cracking up when they, like within the first few pages of Raybearer, they're like, in the reign of Enoba, the perfect. And they're like, yeah! And I'm like, stop, he's not a great character. I just didn't want to.
No, we're aspiring to.
Yeah.
I love knowing that. I did not know that. That does put a whole kind of like, that is funny. In hindsight, great context. Okay, I know we are running short on time, so we will just do a couple of our quick like rapid fire questions that are, I mean, thank you so much for talking to us about your books and your writing process. And we've gotten to know a little bit about both of you, but these are like in no way, these are just like quick. You can justify your answer if you want to. You can also reject them, but you have to provide an alternative. And it can't be like, the alternative can't be both. That's like the only rule, unless you're like really passionately want to make a plea for both. I don't think you'll feel that passionately. I don't think any of these will ignite that kind of fire. But I could be wrong. Okay, first thing, and I'm glad we brought up, Jordan, that you're into like fashion, because I made these and I was like, is this so reductive because it's two women? And I was like, but Jordan has said in interviews that she cares so much about that, like she likes clothing, and that's like what she wrote into right there. So I'm glad you brought it up. If you had to choose only one, earrings or necklaces?
Earrings. I don't actually wear a lot of jewelry generally, but necklaces, I don't know, like I love clothes so much that anything that's kind of messing with your hemline or that you have to like make work with a collar can get in the way. So usually earrings.
Mm-mm. Me too. Because I think earrings, I can wear these knives. You can't really wear a knife on a necklace. It doesn't dangle. It doesn't have the same, you know.
They were knives.
I was just going to say, oh my gosh.
Yeah. It doesn't have the same effect.
Amazing. There was a moment today where someone was telling me something really sad that they had seen, and I felt horrible because all I thought about was how I'd left my earrings for the event at home. Like I realized I had not put them in. And she was like, that's really how you're responding to me right now? Like that.
Earrings are really important to finish out an outfit. So I think you were valid in that.
I am wearing them. It's just you can't see them. My AirPods.
Okay, other this or that, enemies to lover trope or friends to lover?
Enemies to lovers. I know I'm so basic, but I just love that. Like, oh my gosh, mutual disdain, reluctantly dragged over to passionate love. Like, and even though that's obviously not what I write, like I literally write best friends to lovers or soulmates to lovers, at least with these books. Yeah, I have to say that.
Very excited for a future enemies to lovers book from you, though.
Do I even have one in the pipe? I do actually kind of have an enemies to lovers one in the pipeline. It's more like really awkward acquaintances to maybe lovers to enemies to apology tour to lovers.
I love the apology arc. When men grovel, I don't know if it's the man that's groveling, but when men grovel, oh, so good.
The groveling is extensive and so sweet.
When you have advanced reading copies available, let me know.
I shouldn't say this, but currently that character is someone you've already met in Redemptor, so we will see. Anyway.
As Chloe and I make the exact same face. Great.
So much information on me. I feel like I need to like lay down. Oh my god.
Go sprawl out on her floor. We'll still be able to hear you. You can go have a minute. You can answer from afar. It'll be totally fine.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, and I'm sure I just have to ask. Obviously, you love Romeo and Juliet, Chloe, but if you had to, so we're taking them out of the equation. I just like because I assumed that would be your answer no matter what. But if you had to choose between other Shakespeare, Hamlet or Midsummer's Night's Dream?
Ooh, Hamlet. Because I love tragedies.
Because you love knives.
I would love knives. Comedy. You know, comedy is absolutely very good to adapt, but like tragedies, just, you know, the angst, the miscommunication, the I will get revenge, all of that, you know.
This wasn't my question, but my favorite tragedy is actually Macbeth, just because there are so many witches that nobody can do anything about in that play. Like, they just show up and cackle and mess things up or predict things, and no one can do anything about it. It's so fun.
No, that was totally your question, and you have provided a very valid alternative, and I accept that as a yes. Ask about that. Okay, and last one, East Coast or West Coast?
East Coast.
West Coast, man. I'm sorry. Our living costs are just as expensive, but we actually have sunshine.
Valid. That's valid.
And if you want more seasons, you can go up to Portland. It's really beautiful. So, yeah. I know. But your museums are better. There's that.
I was like, what if Chloe's going to throw New York under the bus? It could happen.
I would never do that to New York while I'm here. I would get struck by a bolt of lightning when I walk outside.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much to both of you. I want to throw up the link for everyone one more time of where you can go to easily purchase the book. You're also welcome to go to our main website and find it, or stop into the store. We'd love to see people. Just like hopefully maybe someday Chloe and Jordan, we can have you both in St. Louis. That would be amazing. Just keep us in mind. But thank you both so much. I want to hold up all of them here. I was trying to fit them all into my arms earlier, and I was just like carrying them all over. Looked ridiculous walking around the bookstore, but in such a positive way. So thank you both for this amazing conversation. Is there anything else you want to say before we end tonight?
Thank you all for joining us. Thanks for having us.
Yes. Oh, and real quick, if you have purchased or even pre-ordered Redemptor, you can redeem your purchase for free merch. It doesn't apply to the special like Fairy Loot and Illumicrate editions, unfortunately. But there's a link in my bio that lets you redeem that, and it's only for a limited amount of time. So go redeem and get your Raybearer and Redemptor merch.
Definitely. Well, thank you both so much. And yes. Oh, this has just been so incredible. I just want to give a quick shout out. There's lots of discussion of your crown, Jordan, as there should be. So the perfect note to end on. Thank you so much, everyone who tuned in with us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.